Well, welcome to week number 1 of our growth track here at Navigation Church. If you're joining us either live today or if you're watching by video in our hospitality room, we are so glad that you wanted to know more about Navigation Church. And if you would, for those that are sitting here, it's just page number 1 of your handout that you have. For those joining us by video, it's page number 1 of your book. Go a couple pages in. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to tell you what the 4 weeks of becoming a partner looks like. So here's some inside lingo right now. You will never hear us say this: we want you to become a member of Navigation Church. Because in my mind, here's what member sounds like. How many of you have memberships to a gym? Do you really feel a part of it? Let's be honest. Like, you pay the membership, you can go when you want, but a partnership says we bring what we bring, you bring what you bring, and we do something together. And so we want to invite you to become a partner in Navigation Church. But in order for you to find out if this is your church, if you want myself and the different pastors on staff to be your pastor, we need to tell you what we're all about. So here's what we're going to do. Step number 1, it's about becoming a partner. Step number 2, which, by the way, step number 1 happens on the first week of every month. Step number 2, we're going to help you discover your design. Why were you created? Do you have a purpose? What did God do for you? And by the way, week number 2 will always happen the second week of every month. Step number 3, we want to develop you as a leader. And as soon as you hear leadership, you think all of a sudden you're supposed to run or manage something. We're going to define leadership as influence. How many would say there's people in your life you influence? Congratulations, you're a leader. If you're here and you say hi to someone, you've had influence over them. So we're going to talk about what it means to be a leader. Step 3, ready for this? This is really in-depth now. Step 3 happens on the third week of every month. And then step number 4 is we want you to join a team. We actually have 21 teams that work around the church, both on Sunday mornings, outside of Sunday mornings, and seasonally. So we want you to be able to join a team so you can have impact in the world around you. And week 4 happens on the 4th week of every month. Now, your first question is, what happens if there's 5 weeks in a month? We advertise week 1. That happens on week 1. Week 5 is an off week for us, but every other week we're going to be having our partnership growth track here at Navigation Church, and we want you to join in. So turn the page. Here it is. First thing we want you to know is kind of a history of the church. And so part of that history is my history, my story. And I'm about ready to dash some dreams. I'm about ready to burst some bubbles. If you wanted a perfect pastor to be in charge of a church, you need to go ahead and stand up now and leave the room, because I'm not that. And I'd go as far as this. If you believe you're perfect, you might as well go ahead and stand up and leave the room now, because you're ruining our percentage. Like, at this point, we're 100% imperfect people doing life together, taking the next step in a growing relationship with Jesus Christ, because we're not perfect. I'm a PK. How many of you know what a PK is? Just five. And here's a question, and by the way, those watching on video, you have to do this too. If you're a PK, raise your hand. Because, okay, we have to make special note of us, because like we're on a wanted list most of the time, and your host saw that if you raised your hand. PK basically means I was a pastor's kid. I grew up in church. Sunday mornings I was here. Sunday night I was here. Wednesday midweek I was here. Saturday morning early prayer I was here sleeping. But mom and dad at least brought me. I was at church all the time. And I grew up in church, and actually my mom and dad's church was the church I grew up in. It was known as Sun Life. And when mom and dad first started the church, I love the way one pastor described it. During that time period, if you had a goosebumping guitar, you started a church. It was known as the charismatic movement. Anyone ever heard of that before? The charismatic movement. So dad started a church, and it literally went from nothing to about 800 people really fast. And it just absolutely blew up. Dad was having great influence and impact in the community. But he was also trying to figure it out. My dad was adopted, but he yet knew he was supposed to be a father, so how does that work? My dad knew that he wanted to build a church, but the only thing he knew about church is gathering large groups of people. And one fateful day, one of his elders' wives, wife, singular, actually had cancer. And in getting cancer, they prayed and they prayed and they prayed for her, but eventually she passed away. And my dad's going, man, like, isn't this what faith is all about? Because this is now the faith movement. And in the faith movement, she passed away, and some people came and knocked on his door one night and said, hey, we believe we're supposed to go to the morgue and raise her from the dead. And my dad was like, really? like nothing inside. Have you ever had a feeling inside that you've heard from God and you're like, I know I should do this, but then there's other times you have a feeling inside and you go, I know I shouldn't do this? Well, I believe that's the Holy Spirit helping, and Dad was going, I don't really think I'm supposed to do this. And somehow, since Dad didn't bless them to go to the morgue to try to raise someone from the dead, Dad had no faith. And so that's when we quickly planted a bunch of churches, because this group left and started one, and this group left and started one. But all these people started leaving the church, and my dad then went, hang on a second, if my faith keeps someone from dying, what is God playing all this? Like, how does that reconcile on the books? And so my dad ended up going on a journey to figure out how to build a church. What is the church? What's the ecclesia? That's a big fancy word that basically means us today. So my dad went on a journey, but I don't want to tell you about my dad's journey. I actually want to tell you about someone else's journey. I want to tell you about my older brother. And here's why. And by the way, I would never want to expose anybody's testimony, but this is part of my story, so I have to tell it to you. Because my older brother lived through a season where 600 plus people said the phrase, we love you, but, and left. And he watched friends leave in droves. And would it surprise you to say he started questioning this whole God thing? Right? Because if we're supposed to be friends, if we're supposed to be in connection, how can you leave so easy? So my brother was in this journey, and eventually my brother walked away from God altogether. Didn't want to actually experience that pain again, so thought if he could leave the pain of the church, he wouldn't experience the pain that he had experienced in life, which, by the way, that makes logical sense, you know. But then as my brother was getting older, he had an accident, and broke his back. So he asked his younger brother, me, to help him out at the house. And what younger brother doesn't want to help his older brother? So younger brother's coming around, and he's sitting backwards going, trim that tree, cut that grass. I'm going, yes, sir, and I'm doing it. And one time, when over at the house, which, by the way, wasn't the first time I was exposed to it, but one time there, I found something called beer. You know, and so then it was, hey, I help and I get a beer. And then somewhere along my journey, I found beer, I found tobacco, and I even found marijuana. So again, if you're here wanting a perfect pastor, I apologize, not trying to burst your bubble, but I want to say this: God uses imperfected people and tries to perfect us. So I hope you're okay with that. So ultimately, here's a conversation that I had with my brother one time. He said, hey, if you want to know why I don't do what mom and dad do, because they're busy telling you why they do it, but if you want to know why I don't do it, just let me know. So he wasn't pushing himself on me. He wasn't pushing his agenda, but he actually loved me enough that he wanted to share with me what the revelation he thought he had in his life. And so in that, of course, I said, you know, what is it that you know? And we started having long discussions, and I would go to work and I would ponder, you know, is this God thing for me? And here's a story for you, and I apologize if this offends anyone. I was actually smoking weed with a guy. I can tell you, I could drive you to where we were right now. And we just finished smoking. He looks at me and he says this. He goes, what do you think you want to do with your life? And I go, oh, that's easy. I want to be a pastor. Like, how is that? Like, put the bong down. We need to have a conversation here. But here's the thing. Internally, I knew that who my Savior was and who I wanted to serve. The problem was I was trying to live in a lie that someone else had given to me. So I had information and I had a level of illumination, but I haven't quite moved to the revelation that this is who I need to be. And I was building a remodeling company with my brother-in-law. Things were going great. We were making money. And Mom called me one day, and she goes, hey, I need you to come to church, because Dad has got this new anointing. He's found God in an awesome way. Can you come to church? And I'm like, sure. I still come every Sunday, because that's what I knew how to play church. Anyone know what I mean by that? You know how to come in on Sunday morning. You know, if everyone gets excited, you do well, that's my dance. That right there was it. Like, raise your hand, sing, tithe, leave, but then you kind of live your own life the rest of the week. And she goes, no, I need you to come. We're going to have a special service come Wednesday. And I was like, well, I don't go to church on Wednesday night. Like that, that's not what we do. And she's like, please, you won't believe what's happened to Dad. And again, that's part of his story. I just want to focus on my story. So came in, and Dad is just so fired up, he literally is running around. And if you know my dad, that's not his MO. Like, you don't look at him and go, long distance runner. Like, that's not. But can I say it this way? The Spirit of God had so fired him up. His feet were on fire. So he's moving around. He's preaching a sermon. Couldn't tell you what he preached. But then he goes, hey, it's time for the altar call, which in the old days, this is new for a lot of you, we would actually leave our seats and actually come to the altar. And then you would either kneel and pray, or someone would come by and lay hands on you, and some people even fell down. Like, it all happened up here at the altar. So in the good old days, we'd have an altar call, and I knew how to do them because I was a PK. I was raised in church. So I'd get up out of my seat, and I'd come forward, and I was ready for Dad's altar call, and Dad's coming down the line. And I remember saying to God, tonight's going to be the night we decide if I'm with you or if I'm with the world, if I serve you or if I serve myself, because I need to know you're real. Because I've heard a lot and I've known a lot, but it was time for me to experience a lot. Almost like for my eyes and my heart to know it. And Dad came by and he laid hands on, he prayed, and he's excited, and he's running, and he just kept on going. And I remember going, thanks for nothing, God. And part of me was really disappointed because I wanted to know he was real, and I wanted to know this was what I wanted to know my purpose, my calling. And I remember going, well, it's decided. And right at that moment, my dad turned and embraced me, and we fell to the ground, and I was hugging my natural father, but my spiritual father was embracing me. And I just remember breaking on that day, going, you're real, and you're right, and I want to serve you forever. And so it's just, it's my story. It's what I experienced. And then everything in my life changed, and I was perfect from that day forward. You should be laughing on video too. And that's actually when I got the revelation. I don't think God believes in change. Because if God wanted to change us, he would snap your finger and we'd be perfect. I think God loves processes, though. And the reason I say that is because I went through a process. I went to a discipleship school. I ended up coming back and working for my dad. And he goes, I can't afford to pay you. And I said, you let me live at home for free, and I'll work for free. And he was smart enough to take that deal. And so eventually I became a lead pastor. And in doing that, I found myself not saying his mission statement. I found myself saying something different. And it was helping people take the next step in a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. Because I found in my life, I didn't jump to the end of perfection every day, every conversation, every interaction. I took the next step in a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. And if you're anything like me, every once in a while took a back step. Could have done that better. But so I found myself saying something new. And so eventually actually closed down Mom and Dad's church to launch Navigation Church in January 2014. And launched with some of you even sitting in here today. And those of you watching on video, you're watching this video because there were those years ago that believed in this vision of helping people take the next step, but also something else. So imagine taking binoculars and looking way down the road. What is it that we as a church want to see? The influence that we want to have. We want to look way down the road, and we want to see a pastored community and discipled individuals. So in order to get down the road, you have to take steps. In order to pastor a community, you have to take steps. In order to disciple people, you have to get them to take steps. And so we started casting this vision of how are we going to do this and where are we going to go? And we launched in January 2014, and we were doing great. But God had greater things in store. Because somewhere around that summer, I was at Breadco, and I ran into an old friend of mine by the name of Pastor Brent Johnson. And we were talking about churches, and he had planted a church 4 years earlier, I believe was the number, 4 years earlier. And I threw out this random phrase to him. I said, man, should we do church together? Like, let's blend our two churches together. And that's a good one. And we both went home. I'm sitting, and at that time, my bed was on the floor. I didn't have like a bed box spring. And because when you wrestle your kids, you need to have a wrestling mat on the ground. So I'm sitting on the ground, kind of leaning up on the mattress. My wife's in bed, and we're just talking that night, and I get a text. And it's from Pastor Brent Johnson, and he said, hey, do you have time to meet tomorrow? I remember looking at my wife, I go, I might have done something. Because here's what I'm very anointed to do. Talk first and think later. And you may not be you, but don't worry. I've surrounded myself with people that have a rope on me that's allowed to pull me back. Sometimes I carry scissors. So she goes, what do you mean? And I said, I talked to this pastor today, and I said, why don't we blend our churches together? And she goes, what does that look like? I don't know. Well, how would we do it? I don't know. What's the next step? Oh, I don't know. But let's do this. Pastor Brent and I met, We started talking, and here's the way I say it. Everything I was, he wasn't. Everything he was, I wasn't. And it was almost like, can I say, it was meant to be. It was like the two were supposed to come one. I think that's a marriage thing, so let's not make this weird, but like that's what ended up happening. The two churches blended together to become one, and actually that's what you're sitting in now, is the effects of that. And I'm telling you now, we are seeing salvations and growth uncommon to churches, not just in this area, but in the nation. But I believe it's because God has put the proper people in the proper place with the proper heart to do something. And so if you're watching this right now, here's why this is very important for you to know all this, is if you want Navigation Church to be your home, we're about to tell you what that looks like. But then also more than that, if you want me to be your pastor, if you want the pastors on staff to pastor you, you have to know that you're not coming into perfection. We're just taking our next step in a growing relationship with Jesus Christ just like you, but we want to do it with you. And so that's kind of page one of the history. The next thing is, in doing this, in this growth track that we're going to be talking about, I want to tell you about a prayer that we are going to pray over you, but then also model for you. And so if it's in your notes, it's on page 6. For those following in our class right now, it's on page 6 of your books, and it comes out of Ephesians 1, 17 through 18. And it starts with this. And by the way, this is Paul. See how it's Ephesians? He actually wrote a letter to Ephesus. So he wrote a letter to the people there. And in the letter that he wrote to them, he actually wrote a prayer for them. So this prayer is going to be a huge model for us today. It says this: I keep asking that the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the glorious Father, by the way, so what he's saying is, I'm talking to you Christians here that are connected with this Christian here, and I'm telling you that I have a prayer for you. So possibly you're here today and you're not a Christian, but if you want to be on the same page and a part of the church with us, this is a prayer we have for you. If you're sitting in our class right now and you go, hey, I don't know God, don't worry, by the end of this, you will have an opportunity to do that. And he wants to say this: may give you a spirit of wisdom and revelation. So here's a different way to say this. I really want you guys to know this. Like, as I'm about to pray to our God about you, there's something I really want you to know so that you can forever be impacted in your walk with Jesus Christ. And it says this, number one, so that you may know him better. So here at the church, we want you to know God. Ta-da! Like, wouldn't you go, hey, that's pretty logical. That makes sense. So if Paul's prayer is my prayer for you watching. It's this: we want you to know God. And in knowing God, something amazing happens. And this is kind of the big step here. I pray that your eyes of your heart may be enlightened. And when I say eyes of your heart, you may say, hey, my eyes they don't have a heart. Or my heart doesn't have eyes. My head has eyes, right? Because your eyes see things. But how many of you, your eyes have seen something better so your mind knows it, but you haven't had a heart change yet, right? It could be your finances. It could be the way you communicate. It could be your health. It could be any of these things. But somehow when your heart kind of sees the truth, you start living in the revelation that your brain already had the information for. So what Paul's saying is, listen, I'm not asking for you to have head knowledge right now. I'm asking for your heart to be impacted by what I'm about to tell you, because if your heart has been impacted, guess what? You change the way you operate in the world around you, right? And so then I want your heart to be in line in order, for number 3 here, so you know the hope in which you've been called to. You have been called for a purpose. You have been created with meaning. And the interesting thing here, hope and calling are connected. So if you're sitting here right now, if you're watching this, and you go, I have no hope for my future, I would say this: you don't know the calling of your future. Because the moment you know what you were called to, the moment you know what you were created for, the moment you understand that you have purpose, you have hope for what you're building towards. So Paul's going, listen, I need you to have hope in this. And then the 4th thing that he says, so that the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people. Listen, I want you to have impact in the world around you, because if there's one thing, you can make as much money that you want, but that doesn't mean that you're rich. But the moment that you have impact on someone else's lives, you will feel filthy, stinking rich, because you lay down knowing your life had purpose because you gave someone else meaning. So in this, what we want to talk about are really these four things found in the scripture. I like the way the Message also says it. It says, I ask the God of our Master, Jesus Christ, the God of glory, to make you intelligent and discerning. Could anyone say amen to that? Make me intelligent and discerning and knowing him personally. Your eyes focused and clear so that you may see exactly what it is he's calling you to. Grasp the immensity of the glorious ways of the life he has for his followers. So our growth track, the next 4 weeks, as you sit and watch these videos, as we discuss them here on Sunday morning, the next 4 weeks are going to be based off of this model. So if you want to fill in your blank, here's your first blank for you to fill in. Our growth track consists of 4 steps. Number 1, know God. Ta-da! Again, it's like, it seems pretty basic, but when we say know God, we mean relationally, not intellectually. Because it's one thing to have information about God, it's another thing to have your heart love him. In the scripture that I provided there, Matthew 7, it's this story where people are coming to God and goes, hey, it's time for us to go to heaven. And God goes, I don't know you. And they go, know me, I preached in your name. I built churches in your name. I cast out demons in your name. I did an Easter outreach in your name. Like I did all these things. And he goes, listen, yeah, but we never knew each other. And the word knew there, remember when Mary was told by an angel she was going to have a baby named Jesus? And Mary said to the angels, I've never known a man. The same word know that Mary used is the same word know that we use here. And that's God saying this, listen, you might have had head knowledge and information about me, but you've never had a personal, deep-hearted revelation, and we were intimate to this point. So step number 1 that we want to do here is we want to know God. We also want you to, number 2, and you're fill in the blank, is find freedom. Remember, the eyes of your heart be open. If your eyes of your heart have a full understanding of who God is, guess what? You will walk away from your past to move into your future. But if you're tied to your past, you will never fulfill what it is that you're called to. So here at Navigation Church, we want to help you find freedom. Number 3, we want you to discover your purpose. We want you to live in the full revelation of who you are and what God created you for. But it can't just stop there, because if it stops there, we make it all about us. The 4th step is you have to have the realization, number 4, that you need to make a difference in the world around you. So if you go back to Ephesians, you'll see those 4 steps here. But these 4 steps are the steps that we're going to have in the next 4 weeks of our active growth track. And in doing that, you will be able to find God. You'll be able to find freedom, know God, find God, discover purpose, and of course, make a difference. Why is this important? Because if you want Navigation Church to be your home church, if you want myself and the pastors here to be your pastor, you need to know why we're doing what we're doing. Because if we're honest with ourselves, most likely most churches do this. They help people find God. They're helping people find freedom, helping people discover their purpose, and hopefully having impact on the world around us. I want to say, I need to tell you how we do these things. Because if you like the way we do it, join us, partner with us. If you don't like the way that we do this, and I mean this, I love you enough to say this. If you don't like the way we do it, let us help you take your next step in a growing relationship somewhere else. It's not about Navigation Church growing, it's about you growing in a local church. There's over 30 promises in the New Testament alone that can't be fulfilled in your life if you're not connected to a church. 30 plus promises that cannot be fulfilled unless you're connected. So if you don't like us, and I mean this, if you don't like us, ask the host today, here's what I don't like about you guys, help me find somewhere else. Because here's the thing, you think I'm going to take offense that you don't like the way we do something. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the people who aren't here yet. And guess what? You may like country sound versus our contemporary sound. Let us help you find a church. You may want a church that prays a lot on a Sunday morning. That's fact. There are churches around doing that. There are some churches that when you come on a Sunday morning, they open up a book and it's a lecture every Sunday morning and it's a deep, deep teaching. Guess what? If you want that, we can help you find that, but you need to know what you're at least buying into here. So I'm not kidding when I say this. If you don't like us, ask your host to help you find where you need to go, because by the way, that's still a win in our book. Because we helped you take the next step in a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. Hands need to go down. We're not helping you right now. We'll help you afterwards. We're going to film this. But So here's the thing. If you're in our class right now, we're on page 8 of the book. Everyone else should turn the page, and the next thing you're going to have, number 1, know God. So here's what we're going to do now. Now that we told you the 4 areas, I'm going to briefly cover what the next 4 areas look like. So the first thing is, in knowing God, Sunday services. Primarily, but not exclusively, one of the ways that we help you know God here at Navigation Church is our Sunday morning services. We like to say it this way: our Sunday morning services are the engine that drives the rest of the week. So when the NAV groups meet, conversations that you had, hopefully we say something here, encourage you enough here, have been prepared enough here that you get fired up, and that helps propel the rest of the week in your spiritual journey. Maybe it's a handout, maybe it's a study that we're doing together, but it's our Sunday morning. Now, it's important for you to know why we're going to highlight this, because you need to know how we do our Sunday mornings. Because a lot of times people think they go to church for themselves. I go to church to get what I need. I go to church because I need blessed. And here at Navigation Church, we actually think just a little bit different. We're not here for the people that are here now. We're here for the people yet to come. So we create a worship environment. You remember when I said when we look way down the road, we want to see a pastored community or discipled individuals? Most people think Sunday mornings should be when we're discipling people. We don't believe that here. We believe our Sunday morning, as we look down the road, this is where we pastor our community. Because if you know God, you're going to be able to find him here, but you're going to be able to find him because you're helping. If you don't know God and you're investigating him here, this is what we're presenting on a Sunday morning. If you're cynical, we want you here on a Sunday morning. Because we're not just here, actually, can I say it this way? We're not here so all of us Christians can have a bless me, help me club. And chances are you're here because when you came here, you loved the feeling when you got here. The feeling that you felt when you got here was a bunch of people waiting for you to get here. So we had arms open wide, doors wide open, warm, hot coffee bar. If it was warm, return it. They'll get you a new one, even now. But it was a warm, welcoming environment because we have been waiting for you. We've been expecting you. And it's really important for you to know that when you get here, we're going to invite you to know Jesus, and we're going to invite you to get connected. And if you say, well, I need this out of a Sunday morning, you may never get that because this is who we are. And if you come back thinking we're going to change the next week, you're going to just get frustrated. So right now, in class, raise your hand and say, hey, host, I don't want to help people find Jesus. I want to find him for myself. It'll be really awkward for you to say that, but because here's why. We are completely distracted by that which is lost. And here's what I mean by that. I have to tell a story on my wife because I've never lost my child. She has 3 times. Now, one was in Disney. It was real short, so that's not a good one. The best one was when my wife went to Shop and Save, just up the road from us here. She went to Shop and Save, and one of our boys decided to play hide and go seek. So left my wife and went and hid behind toilet paper inside the shelf. And my wife, how many have ever lost kids before? Raise your hand. Show you're a bad parent. Good, good. So you got to do it in class. You got to raise your hand. So here's what happens, right? You go, hey, and I'll just, Gideon, and you kind of start, you walk the long aisle just kind of peering down each one, right? And nothing appears. Then the voice gets a little louder because at some point you don't care what people think around you, and your pace picks up a little bit. Does this sound familiar? Roughly a cold sweat occurs, your heart starts racing, and anxiety starts raising. And you see some people that clearly know you lost your kid, and they could care less because it's not their kid. And somehow this stranger you don't know, you're annoyed with them, right? Because you need my cause right now. It got to the point where Shop and Save went to complete lockdown. All doors, and they have a procedure. It's great. You should hide a kid, and they'll do this for you. Like people on doors because you don't know if they're being kidnapped. They went into lockdown. But then all of a sudden, Gideon realized he was lost too. And here's the craziest thing. Cammie still had another kid in the cart, right? And I was like, if you think about it, you're like, hey, lost one, but I still got one. It's a win. Which, by the way, that's a lot like Jesus, because when a coin was lost, right, when a sheep was lost and when a son was lost, God left the 99 to find the one. Because even though he has one, even though he has 99, even though we had a kid with us, we were completely distracted by that which was lost. And when Cammie came running up to Gideon, and Gideon's crying because there was something inside of him that knew he was lost, and came running to the one who was supposed to find him, and they embraced, and they're both sitting there crying, that's when you understand the heart of the Father. Here at Navigation Church, we get completely distracted by that which is lost, and we love that you are here. We love that you raise hands, clap hands, put your hands in your pocket. We love that you stand or that you sit. We love that you're in the back cafe or that you're here in the auditorium. We love all that about you, but we need you to know this. This is huge on the heart of Navigation Church. We're completely distracted by that which is lost, and it consumes us. So if you want to partner with us, you need to know that you need to be partnering, not for this just to be your church that you get from, but your church that you give from. Because we're waiting for those who aren't here yet. So that's why I take so much time to explain why Sunday morning's important, because that's why we do Sunday mornings. And by the way, do I believe Sunday mornings are meant for Christians and non-Christian? Absolutely. Even as we prepare our sermons, we make sure to have something. So if you're here for 5 years, 50 years, or 5 minutes, we want something in there for everybody. But you should know at the end of the service, there will be a point where we say, can every eye be closed and head be bowed, so that we can now tell them about Jesus Christ. So we're absolutely lost on it. Here's how we do this. Our Sunday morning then, we're focused on a party. This is actually, the word party is actually one of our 4 core values here at the church. After all, that if you're interacting with the Savior of the universe and it's boring, you're doing it wrong. Church was never meant to be endured, but enjoyed. So if you're here right now and you feel like you're enduring church, if you're enduring this class, we might not be for you. And by the way, I'm so free to say that because I want you to find where you were meant to be connected into. And if it's us, we love to have you here, but if it's not us, if you're not enjoying this and you're enduring this, one of us is doing it wrong. So let's help you take that next step in a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. And so number 2 is it's inspiration. We believe the church should be a place where people experience God's presence. So in experiencing God's presence, here's something you're going to hear all the time here. We're Christ-centered, Spirit-driven. We have a plan, which by the way is point number 3. We have preparation. But you also need to know that in the preparation, if I'm in the middle of preaching, if a singer's in the middle of singing and they feel like God put something on their heart, we're going to clearly communicate that, because you may be here on a day where you need to hear something specific. So we're going to be Christ-centered at all times, but on the other hand, we're always going to be Spirit-driven. There's going to be a tension between those two things, and we'll always be prepared when you walked in the door. Not just prepared with the coffee and the greeters and the kids and all that, but we're also going to be prepared in the presentation of the gospel. Here's the way we say it. We want you to have practical applications on a Sunday morning. And those watching on your video, if you go to the back of your book, you'll actually see our 5 Ps. Practical application is one of them, because we believe the gospel is like a can of paint. When you look at the Bible, in the Bible, it's beautiful, just like a can of paint is. But if you want to know the true value of that paint, apply it to a wall. Now it becomes alive. If you want to know the real value of the word, apply it to your life. So the worst thing that can happen is you come in on Sunday morning and you go, that guy sounded smart, I don't have a clue what he said. Which, by the way, has never been said of me. So you're in a really good crowd there. You didn't need to laugh that hard. But what we do want you to walk away with, man, I hadn't thought about that before. I wonder if that would work. So we're intentional about our practical application in our preparation. And number 4, of course, is salvations. When it comes to our Sunday morning and our gatherings, we're all going to be about salvations, and this is how we're going to help you find God. And a lot of these happen with providential relationships. You get connected with someone, and possibly a providential relationship was you walking in here, hearing me give what we're known as an altar call. Now, I said earlier, an altar call is when you come down front. Today, we do it just a little bit different. We do this, eyes closed, head bowed. Because we're in a different time, and that's all right. Coming forward or sitting down, that's methodologies. But one thing that can't change is the theology that we need to tell you Jesus loves you. And so when you come here on a Sunday morning, I want to ask you this. Partner with us when it comes to salvations. Because you need to do what only you can do, and I will do what you can't do. Because you have friends I don't know that need to know about Jesus. And on a regular basis, you need to bring the farthest, hardest, most cynical people to church. And by the way, we're not looking for the easy. No such thing when it comes to salvation. But when you partner with us, you bring those people on a regular basis. And by the way, I will then do what maybe you can't do. And when I say that is, there's a chance you've been having God conversations, but when it goes to closing the deal and asking the big question, do you want to know Jesus? A lot of people freeze at that time. I'm very comfortable at that time. I love that. I thrive on that time. I would say it's my favorite part, but then we get to baptize, and I think that's my favorite part. And then we get to do communion, and I think that's my favorite part. And then they bring someone new, and there's someone new finds God. That's my favorite part. So it's all in my top 5. Can we say it like that? So when you come, we will then do what you are maybe uncomfortable to do, and that's encouraging to know Jesus Christ. So that's how we actually partner together, but it's also how we share Christ. So those, keep following in the handout here, those watching in our class, we're on page 11 at this point, how we share Christ. Step number 1, for you to do your part, you need to accept personal responsibility. Do you know that it's not God's job to talk about God? I promise this is true. Like, God can brag about himself because he can, but the reality is, in the Bible, he calls us his ambassadors. And when I say the word ambassador, how many understand that the United States of America have ambassadors that speak on their behalf in other nations? We speak on behalf of God in our nation, in our world. And by the way, do you mind, and if for those joining us in class, I need to tell you, this is going to be the hardest thing I say all day, but we all need to hear this. According to Ezekiel 3:18, it actually says that if we don't share the gospel to those who need to hear it, their blood is on our hands. Are you okay with? This is like our be connected with the church and grow. But listen, sometimes growth needs truth. And if there's someone who's been placed on your heart for you to share the gospel with, and you're closing your mouth, the Bible actually says their blood's on your hands. You're responsible. Why? Because you're his ambassador. You're meant to talk to people about God. So step number 1, you have to accept personal responsibility. Step number 2, build relationships. And the reason we say build relationship, we are not interested in you trying to bring people to church because you theologically outdebated them. Because the prayer wasn't, God, change the eyes of their mind. It was change the eyes of their heart. What's the famous phrase? They don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And we will change people when they know how much they care about, what we care about them. And then they'll look at your life and they go, how are you better? And you say, let me introduce God to you. Because you've done it through a relationship. Share your personal story. I think for years the church has it wrong. We like to go to people and tell them what's wrong about them. Where when you heard my personal story today, I told you what was wrong with me. So we stop evangelizing, we stop witnessing, we stop testifying because we think we don't have enough scripture to prove to them why they're wrong. Versus telling them, hey, here's why I'm better. So you share your personal story. And then the final one is give a personal invitation. Oh, like everyone, like I'm seeing heads go, no. Like you said we didn't have to do that. Some of you are bold enough, confident enough, and comfortable enough about doing this. About giving a personal invitation to know Jesus. Here's another personal invitation. Hey, why don't you come to church with me? I love my church. I've partnered with them because I believe in the mission and the vision that they're doing. Why don't you just come and then you let me give the personal invitation? And I need everyone to know this. Watching online, sitting here now, maybe you're viewing the video, whatever it might be. When you bring a guest here, we will do everything we can not to embarrass you. We will do everything we can to honor your guest as if they were coming to our house to eat one night. We're going to prepare a table they can feast off of that will be clean, set, and intentional. And in you bringing them here, and when we give an invitation, I give you this permission, that when I ask for all heads to be bowed, eyes to be closed, you do this. Just do it. Did you guys see that over here? You just, online, you got this. You just do a little peer to your right. Because I will tell you now, when you go, what's the favorite Sunday you've ever experienced? Some of you may go, a Good Friday service, or some of you, man, 2 Easters ago they did so and such. And a lot of us will say this, on the Sunday I got saved. But here's another one I promise you'll say, do you remember when I brought so and so? And their life is different because they said yes to Jesus. Your life will forever be changed when someone else's life gets changed. And so partner with us. So that's how, that's how we're doing it here. But in sharing the gospel and sharing our story, it's not meant to stay here at these four walls in our NAV groups. It's meant to go beyond that. And actually, in Acts chapter 1, it says this: you'll be my witness, or can we use this word? You're supposed to be the ambassadors that go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. So as Navigation Church, we go way beyond these walls, and here's how. Number one, in our Jerusalem, here's your fill in the blank here, our cities. So what is one of our key things, and when we put our binoculars and we look way down the road, we want to see a pastored community. So if we're not doing anything in the community, we're failing. Luckily, you're a part of a church that's very intentional about being a part of the community. There's outreaches that we do, and we have a lot listed there. We do Easter outreach. We do, in the fall, we do a big festival. We, on purpose, do a night to shine, and even adding those to those with special needs. We do a night to shine. As a church, we're the chaplain to the police department. So I want to tell you this, that when we do an outreach, when I spend time in a ride-along or at a police station, and even this past week, for example, we were able to give a large donation to a ministry to help them plant something new here in the St. Louis area. You did that. If you're a partner of Navigation Church and you're attending, giving, and all those type of things, your finances helped plant a new ministry in St. Louis this past week. Your finances helped a police officer either get over a situation they experience, a marriage to succeed, or communication to get, like, you did that. Because we get to pastor our community that way. And so we do that in our Jerusalem. On page 12 of your book, it's also in Judea and Samaria. It's in our nation. So the way we do that in our nation is we partner with, and we're going to use the word here, apostolic, and apostolic means a covering. FMCI, Federation of Churches and Ministers International. Jim Hodges is who oversees that. But he's our national ministry that we connect with, specifically a ministry out of the state of Washington, D.C., it's Washington, D.C. We intentionally send ambassadors there to pray with senators and representatives to help them in their journey to find biblical answers, but also spiritual truths. And so FMCI does a lot of things with local churches. It's an event I go to every year as far as a regional conference. And then, of course, Our World. Our World, we partner with MFI, Ministers of Fellowship International, out of City Bible Church out of Oregon. MFI, they are, when we as a local church need help, they're ones that help us. But then this next 10 years, I believe, they're putting a plan together to plant churches throughout the nations as well as the nation. And so we partner with MFI. You partner with MFI. So your influence goes way beyond the walls of, can we say this, Collinsville, Caseyville, Maryville. It goes way beyond that because we're actually trying to do everything we can to fulfill that great commission God's called us to. So question for you is, how do you participate? How do you help when we partner with Navigation Church? Step number one, pray. Another one of the P's that we'll always talk about here is having private disciplines. Prayer, fasting, and giving. Why? Because time, food, and money are limited resources that all of us have. So God says, give me your time in prayer. Give me your hunger pains so you seek after me. And make sure to give of your money so you don't become materialistic. And so in our private disciplines, prayer is one of them. Pray that when people come here on a Sunday morning, they find salvation. Pray that when they get connected to small groups and throughout our NAV groups and other groups that meet here, pray that they have an interaction with Jesus Christ. Pray for our outreaches. Pray for the ministries that we partner with. Pray for us. The second thing is give. Why? If you don't give, we can't do anything. Ta-da! Like, it doesn't go much deeper than that, but the Bible does require and request for you to give, and that is much for you as it is for us. But then also when you give of your resource, now we have the ability to actually finance and fund that which we're called to. And then, of course, the last one is go. Another one of the P's that we talk about is you need to have a personal ministry. If you do not have a personal place that you minister out of, your spiritual growth will get stunted. It just happens. But if you yourself pour out, you now need more, so God will pour in, and your reservoir is new every day. And so we encourage you to then go. Next page in, remember we covered step number one, and I know the next couple go just a little bit faster, but the first thing we want you to do is we want you to know God. Step number two in that prayer, we want you to find freedom. How do we find freedom here at Navigation Church? One of the key one is our NAV groups. Once again, let's use insider lingo. We say the word NAV groups. You might have heard small groups, cell groups, missional groups, home groups, all types of those things. We call them NAV groups. Why? Because we're Navigation Church. We have NAV group, NAV kids, NAV students. Like, it's a branding thing at this point, okay? So we want you encouraged to be a part of a small group known as a NAV group. Why? Because we believe that life changes happen in the context of relationships. So if you're asking God to change you and you need to get roughed up, he'll probably use a friend to do it. Welcome to it. So NAV groups have one simple purpose: to bring people together. God created us to live in community with others, and it's only then that we experience the fullness of life that he intended for us, when we are doing life together. So we want to encourage you to get connected into a NAV group, because the bigger we get as a church, we're very intentional to get smaller at the same time. And here's why I say that, because number one, NAV groups do three things. It's a place for you to connect with others. Can I tell you, some of the most connected churches in the world are some of the largest churches in the world? Because if you're really big, there's no way the pastor can minister to everybody. So he knows that they have to create smaller areas for people to connect to. But I can also tell you stories that people have come to from churches of 100 that said, I've been there for years and I never felt plugged in. Bigness and smallness equals specifically to connectiveness. If you're not connecting, no matter what size you're in, it's big. If you're connected, no matter what size it is, it's small. So in order for you to feel connected here at Navigation Church, and by the way, this is on you. I can't make you do this. This is on you. But in order to be a part of what we're doing here, you need to be connected with others. The another thing it does, it protects. It protects you as an individual. If you're gone for 4 weeks and you're a part of a large church, I'm never going to notice that you're gone. But your NAV group is going to go, hey, where's so-and-so? Haven't seen them around for a while. So they can pursue you, they can encourage you, they can pray for you, they can support you. There's accountability there. So you need to be connected so you're protected. And then, of course, the final one is it's a place to grow. Why? Because as we look way down the road, we want to see discipled individuals. And discipled individuals isn't going to happen here on a Sunday morning because we're pastoring the community. Now, you yourself can grow as an individual, but if you ever come and go, man, where does this church just go deeper? Well, we're always going to have classes. We're always going to have special things. But if you want to go deeper, you got to go to our NAV groups. Because on a Sunday morning, I can go as deep as I want, but if people aren't coming to Christ, I went too deep. But yet, if people are coming to Christ, what's the definition of going deep? A life forever changed, a soul recognizing its depravity, to me that's pretty deep. So if it's head knowledge that you're seeking for, you need to be a part of these NAV groups. So the next couple pages, I'm just going to kind of highlight for you to come back and read at another time. Again, for those watching in the class, we're page 16 and 17. 4 things specifically on page 17, 4 specific things about our NAV groups is, we're specifically calling NAV groups those that meet during the week to talk about what we discussed on Sunday morning. But I need to let you know that there's other small groups also attached to Navigation Church. So the men's group, they may call it roundtables. The women may call it a breakout. The NAV students, they kind of break up into small groups in their thing. There could be a small group that gets together for a short-term Bible study. So when all those things are true here at Navigation Church, but NAV groups are specifically the groups that meet throughout Wednesday, or throughout the week, in order to discuss Sunday morning services, or the conversation we had Sunday morning. And here's what the schedule looks like. Off on January, they go all the way through May, off June and July, go all the way through November, back off December, January. So here's how it helps you know this. We take the summer off, we take the winter off. Why? Because you're traveling and you're partying, and there's no reason to try to step on those. But here's the great thing about our NAV groups. We have some NAV groups that never stop meeting. Because our NAV groups, we facilitate them, but we don't own and operate them. So if you're a NAV group and you want to meet all the time, meet all the time. Good on you. Great. Keep going it. And also with our NAV groups, we want to help you find one, but we won't place you in one. Because they need to be built around relationships, people you can grow with and do life together. And if you're sitting here right now, you're watching, and maybe your group watching this video is already kind of collaborating and gelling together, and you go, listen, I don't know a lot of people, and I don't know all these NAV groups. I only know about these 6 or 8 people sitting right here. Congratulations, you just started a NAV group. It's that easy. Like, if you know 4, 6, 8 people, you've started a NAV group, because the final point is we believe anyone can lead a NAV group. And after you complete these 4 weeks, there's a brief training that Pastor Brent takes everyone through, and you're ready to run a NAV group. And so NAV groups are very important here. You guys doing okay? We want you to know that we want you to know God. We want, number 2, for you to find freedom. That happens with doing life together with other people. The final thing is we want you to discover your purpose. Week number 3. This is what our growth track, actually, that's not true. It's actually week 2 of our growth track. So week number 1 and week number 3, they're teachings like this. Week number 2 and week number 4, you do a lab. When I say a lab, it's week number 2, you're going to sit down and you're going to do a DISC test. You're going to figure out what your personality is. But then after that, you're going to take a gift assessment test. What are you gifted for? Because here's why this is really important. If you want to partner with Navigation Church and you're an outgoing person that loves people, we cannot put you in the parking lot ministry. Because everyone's just going to keep driving by you, and you're outgoing, but no one's stopping. And you want to talk to people, but people just keep waving at you. You'll eventually stop cars and get people backed up just to talk to someone. And then we're wondering, why isn't anyone coming in? It's because you're being hospitable outside, and we need them in here. And so you're going to do a gift assessment week number 2 to find out what God's created you for. What is your purpose? But then also, on week number 4, we're going to talk to you about the teams that we have here for you so we can get you plugged in. But in this growth track, this is where you're going to discover your purpose. And so step number 1, and this is your fill in the blank at 19, and if you can't remember what the blanks are, just simply refer back to page 1. It's on there. Step 1 is we want you to become a partner. It happens on the first week of every month. Step 1 is on week 1 of every month. Step number 2, we want you to discover your design. This is where we're going to do our lab, and this is where you're going to find your spiritual gifts. And if you've been here for a while and you would like to go back and take this spiritual test, do it. Week number 3, we want you to develop in your leadership. Why? Because if you influence anyone, we want you to have this, we want you to be influential. Step number 4, we want you to join a team. Why? Because you were never meant to do life by yourself as a lone ranger, and when we come together, we're better than when we're individuals. Final thing is, and this is our language for here at the church, we want you to be a part of a team. This is code for volunteer. We want you to be a part of the team. So my job here as a pastor of Navigation Church, and this is in the Bible in Ephesians, my job is actually to equip you and train you for the work of the ministry that you're called to. And in doing that, positioning you to a place where you can excel. So we have over 20 teams here that you can participate in, and it's so that you can find the purpose that God's created you for. So at this time, if those watching by video, we're just going to ask you to hit pause, and then you can kind of discuss what it is that we've already talked about. But then we're going to come back in just a little bit to give you a little more practical information about how the church is set up and ran on a day-to-day basis. So hit pause now.